Weed's not addictive, it's all natural. That's what an older friend of mine told me the first time I ever got high. Unfortunately for me at the time, due to my lack of cannabis education, I had no reason not to believe them.
Grass is in habit forming like alcohol is.
20 years later, in 2024, this myth about cannabis not being addictive is just as rampant as it was in 2004, the first time I got high.
I've been smoking weed for 14 years and I've never once felt like I was addicted.
One of the most consistent risk factors we need to address with young people is how pervasive misinformation about cannabis is, especially in 2024, where the cultural perception of risk associated with cannabis use is at an all-time low.
What it really does is expand your mind. Makes you see things more clearly.
So let's start with the myth I hear the most, that cannabis isn't addictive. I still hear this today in a lot of my work with young people and unfortunately, adults. Here's what you need to know. Cannabis use disorders are the #1 diagnosis for substance use disorders among teenagers entering into addiction treatment right now in America. In 2022, researchers concluded that approximately 1 in 10 individuals who use cannabis will become addicted. For those who start using before the age of 18, this rate rises to 1 in 6 individuals that use cannabis. Among adults, a recent article published in the Lancet Psychiatry Journal in July 2022 reported that in Europe, we're seeing a 76% increase in cannabis use disorders diagnoses. While the misinformation that cannabis is not addictive continues to spread, the fact that cannabis is more addictive than ever before is missing from many of the prevention conversations with young people and adults.
But grass is not a dangerous drug. You don't become an addict.
As mentioned earlier in WeedWise, this increase in addiction is due to higher potency rates of THC in what is known as higher strength cannabis. Again, higher strength cannabis is defined as anything that has a THC potency rate above 20%. Right now in 2024, higher strength cannabis makes up the majority of the products available for sale. Moving on to another myth you might have heard. This is the #1 question I get from parents today. How do I keep my kids safe from fentanyl? Is cannabis laced with fentanyl? There's a lot of scary stories out there suggesting cannabis could be laced with fentanyl, a strong opioid responsible for many overdose deaths here in the United States. But it's important that we recognize that this is misinformation and that we question the source of these stories. The simple truth is, there is no proof that cannabis is being laced with fentanyl. In reality, this misinformation distracts from a necessary conversation you need to have with your teen about the actual risk of being exposed to fentanyl. I'll cover this later in our lesson. But here are a couple of reasons why you shouldn't be concerned about cannabis being laced with fentanyl. Heat breaks down fentanyl. Fentanyl gets destroyed by heat. So when cannabis is smoked, whether in a joint, blunt, or any other way, any fentanyl supposedly mixed with it would be destroyed and does not affect the individual inhaling the cannabis. In terms of potentially vaping cannabis that is laced with fentanyl, vape pens don't get hot enough. Most vape pens don't get hotter than 450 degrees Fahrenheit, which is too low to affect fentanyl. Fentanyl needs temperatures around 900 degrees Fahrenheit to vaporize. So even if fentanyl were in THC oil, it would not survive the vaping process. As of today, there have been no confirmed cases of an individual fatally overdosing from fentanyl-laced cannabis. So what do you actually need to know as a parent to keep your kids safe from fentanyl? As of January 2024, the New England Journal of Medicine, one of the United States' top respected medical journals, reported that the #1 way young people are being exposed to fentanyl is through accidental use of counterfeit pills. These counterfeit pills are designed to resemble prescription medications like Percocet, ADHD meds, Xanax, and so on. The counterfeit pills look exactly like real prescription pills, but are contaminated with fentanyl, which is incredibly easy and affordable for counterfeit pill makers to synthesize. So even though illicit substance use among teenagers is at the lowest it has ever been, illicit substance use meaning anything other than alcohol, nicotine, or cannabis, teenage overdose death rates are the highest they've ever been. Fentanyl is now involved in at least 75% of adolescent overdose deaths, and the driver behind this increase is the accidental use of these counterfeit pills. So we're not concerned with a young person overdosing on fentanyl from smoking fentanyl-laced cannabis. We're not even concerned about a young person being exposed to fentanyl through opioid use. Let me explain. This is because only 1/3 of 1% of 12th graders in 2022 report using opioids in their lifetime. The number we actually need to focus on is the 9.3% of 12th graders in 2022 who reported misusing prescription medications in their entire life. Prescription pill misuse is the #1 way young people are being exposed to fentanyl. They are purchasing what they believe to be actual prescription medications, misusing them, and unknowingly ingesting a fatal dose of fentanyl. So when talking to your kid about the dangers of fentanyl, make sure you discuss that the biggest risk for them is counterfeit pills. Emphasize that we do not take other people's medications, and we do not take medications that are not prescribed to us. For more information about counterfeit pills and fentanyl, check out the WeedWise library for parents. Additionally, in this lesson, we only had time to focus on 2 cannabis myths. And unfortunately, there are a lot more.
It's a groovy way of relaxing, opening your senses.
Check out the Cannabis Misinformation article in the WeedWise library for parents to learn more. All right, we're almost there. Our next lesson is our last lesson, and we're gonna learn how to talk to your child about cannabis, how to set clear expectations and rules about cannabis use, and how to keep them healthy by continuing this conversation moving forward.